You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your PMP certification journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Metrics matter because they turn raw activity into useful decisions instead of empty report theater. The whole point of tracking is to change behavior where it improves outcomes, not to create dashboards that look busy but do nothing. Start with the question you want the metric to answer. Are we on track to deliver the next releasable slice? Is quality degrading? Or are we piling up work in progress that slows everything down? Choose a small set of indicators that link directly to those questions and make them visible in context. Treat each chart as a decision support tool. What action will you take if the line moves left, right, up, or down? That discipline separates helpful measurement from noise. Prefer leading indicators and visible trends over retrospective applause metrics because leaders and teams need signals that allow intervention before problems become crises. Leading indicators include cycle time trending up, growing WIP, or a widening gap between completed work and planned scope. These surface issues you can still influence. Pair those with outcomes signals adoption, user satisfaction, defect escape rates, so you connect activity to impact. Use simple visual trends rather than complex tables. A clear trend line invites questions and actions, whereas a dense spreadsheet often invites delay. Always annotate charts with recent relevant events so the trend's cause is traceable and the next action obvious. Tie metrics to explicit actions such as staffing adjustments, slicing strategy, sequencing changes, or quality investments so every chart drives a decision path. For example, a steady rise in cycle time might trigger an immediate WIP reduction policy and a short swarming experiment. A sudden jump in escape defects should trigger a temporary freeze on new features until the root cause is addressed. In exam scenarios, call out the decision the metric supports rather than reciting the numbers. When you read metrics aloud, narrate the implied action as plainly as the statistic. The chart recommends what to do next, not just what happened. A sprint burndown chart tracks the remaining work in a sprint over the sprint's days, and its slope is the clearest daily signal of pace and alignment to the sprint goal. In plain language, plot how much work is left each day and draw the ideal straight line from start to zero. The team compares the actual line to the ideal to see if they are on track. If the actual line tracks below the ideal, the team is ahead. If it veers above, the team is behind. Use the burndown to answer a single practical question each day. Are we likely to meet the sprint goal if nothing changes? That keeps stand-ups focused and concrete. Healthy burndowns show a steady, reasonably smooth decline that matches the team's predicted cadence and the sprint goal. The slope need not be perfectly straight, but it should trend consistently toward the finish. Warning signs include long, flat periods where the line doesn't move because work is blocked, and a sawtooth pattern caused by frequent scope additions and removals that hide the team's true progress. A flat line in the middle of the sprint says, "Someone is waiting," and demands immediate attention. A sawtooth tells you the sprint has turned into a negotiation rather than a focused delivery window. When the burndown warns, take concrete actions, remove impediments, swarm on blocking items, or renegotiate scope with the product owner based on what can realistically be finished while preserving the definition of done. Use the daily scrum to surface blockers and name owners for unblocking actions. If scope churn is the cause, pause and ask whether additions are essential to the sprint goal or should be deferred. The burndown's purpose is to inform rapid corrective steps so the team can restore a predictable decline, rather than to shame anyone for missing a number. A release burnup chart shows cumulative work completed over time against the total scope or benefit threshold you aim to achieve, and it's excellent at making scope changes visible without hiding progress. Put simply, one line shows total scope and another line shows completed work. As time advances, the distance between those lines tells the narrative. If the scope line jumps upward, scope has increased. If the completed line rises steadily, you are making progress. Use Burnup to keep long horizon stakeholders honest about scope creep and to show how completed increments change the picture for release decisions. Burnup charts are particularly useful for forecasting when combined with throughput or velocity, because they let you project when the cumulative completed line will intersect the scope threshold given recent delivery rates. Rather than promising a single date, present a range of likely dates based on recent throughput and state the confidence level plainly. If the completed line is growing but the scope line keeps moving up, the burnup tells the story. You are delivering, but the target has shifted, so decisions about scope or investment are now urgent. When burnup reveals that scope threatens a date or benefit, act. Reorder the backlog to protect the most critical slices, de-scope lower value items, or decide to change the release horizon with documented trade-offs. Use the burnup as a governance artifact in conversations about whether to add resources or accept a later date. The visual clarity helps leaders choose rationally. In short, burnup transforms scope debate from an abstract argument into a visible trajectory that supports evidence-based trade-offs. A cumulative flow diagram, spoken slowly and clearly, stacks bands that represent counts of work items in each workflow state: to do, in progress, review, done across time, so you can see where work accumulates and how steady the flow is. Read the chart by looking at bandwidths. The vertical thickness of a band equals the number of items in that state at a given moment. The horizontal distance through the bands approximates lead time. If the bands remain roughly parallel, flow is stable. If one band balloons, you've likely identified a bottleneck that needs action. That intuitive mapping makes CFD a powerful operational tool for teams. Interpreting the CFD in practice, a bulging in-progress band signals WIP is high and work is queuing. In that stage, expect rising lead times and delivery unpredictability if it persists. The horizontal distance from the left edge of the to-do band to the right edge of the done band gives a visual sense of lead time for items entering at a certain point. Use the CFD to spot trends early. A slowly widening testing band suggests capacity or policy problems in verification, while a narrowing done band might mean deployment issues. This visual language translates directly into decisions about WIP limits or capacity reallocation. Use the CFD to trigger concrete operational experiments. Set tighter WIP limits for the overloaded stage, swarm the bottleneck with cross-functional help, or change policies to reduce batch sizes and shorten queues. Remember to standardize workflow definitions first. If team members interpret states differently, the CFD lies to you. Keep the CFD readable by maintaining consistent swim lane definitions and by annotating the chart with major events so reviewers link cause and effect rather than guessing why the band changed shape. Quality and outcome signals must accompany flow metrics because healthy throughput without acceptable quality or adoption is a hollow victory. Measure escaped defects, rework rate, and cycle time aging as immediate quality indicators that drive action. Escaped defects count issues found in production after release and point to gaps in testing or definition of done. Rework rate shows how much effort is spent fixing prior work rather than delivering new value. Cycle time aging highlights items that linger and may signal hidden dependencies. These metrics tell you whether speed costs technical health. Pair these quality measures with outcome proxies like adoption, user satisfaction, or net value metrics, so the team understands whether delivered increments actually produce the intended effect. Adoption rates tell you whether users embraced a feature. Simple satisfaction pulses or Net Promoter Score snippets signal perceived value. Together, these outcome measures turn delivery into learning about impact rather than mere activity. Always view quality and outcomes alongside DoD adherence because context matters. A high escaped defect rate with weak DoD implies a process failure, whereas the same defect rate with strong DoD could indicate a gap in test coverage. Report quality and outcomes by exception, and keep the set of tracked indicators tight to avoid metric overload. Choose the few signals that most directly influence decisions, perhaps escaped defects per release, median cycle time, and a simple adoption metric, and only expand when a trend requires deeper analysis. Present these metrics with the next action front and center. Escaped defects doubled. Action. Freeze new features this sprint, and focus on root cause remediation. This practice preserves attention on what to change, rather than on what looks interesting. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Reading a Burndown chart as a practical daily tool means turning remaining work divided by days left into a simple, audible target, and then comparing actual progress to that target. Say it slowly. Remaining work divided by remaining days gives the daily amount you must complete to stay on the ideal line, and each morning you compare that target to what was finished yesterday. If the actual completions fall short, the chart recommends immediate actions, unblock, swarm, or negotiate scope, and if the team exceeds the target, you preserve slack or pull a thin slice forward. Always state explicit assumptions when you read a burndown, what counts as remaining work, whether the definition of done is consistent, and whether planned capacity changed. Reading a burnup for forecasting is similarly straightforward. Plot cumulative completed work versus a line representing the total scope or benefit threshold, then project where the completed line will intersect the target line using recent throughput as the slope. Speak the steps slowly when you explain it aloud. First, show recent completion rate, then extend that slope to estimate a likely intersection window and present a conservative range rather than a single date. Attach a confidence note. Did throughput include interruptions or unusual spikes? If scope has changed, explain how the target line moved and what that means for the forecast. The burnup becomes actionable only when assumptions about scope and throughput are explicit. Use a simple heuristic when reading a cumulative flow diagram. If the width of a work-in-progress band increases while throughput remains flat, expect lead time to rise. This is the Little's Law intuition in visual form. Describe the CFD aloud in steps. Name the bands, point to which band widened, state the recent throughput level, and then say the likely outcome in plain English, longer waits and less predictability, so listeners know which lever to pull. Always state underlying assumptions, team stability, a consistent definition of done, and an unchanged WIP policy. Reading charts aloud this way ties visual signals to immediate managerial choices, rather than detaching data from action. Metric misuse often shows up as weaponizing numbers. When charts are used to shame teams or to punish variability instead of to surface learning, measurement ceases to be helpful. In plain terms, metrics should inform improvement conversations, not become scorekeeping that encourages gaming. If people begin to hide bad signals or inflate numbers to look good, the organization has turned learning into performance theater. Keep metrics attached to explicit next steps and small experiments so incentives remain aligned with learning. Where weaponization appears, reset the conversation about what success truly means and which behaviors you want to encourage. Another anti-pattern is relying solely on a burndown that hides scope creep, because the team keeps adding new work while removing completed items from the visual baseline, making the chart appear healthy even as progress stalls. The burnup fixes this by keeping scope visible, but misuse continues when people ignore workflow policies. A cumulative flow diagram without consistent state definitions or with ad hoc state transitions is meaningless. If teams apply metrics inconsistently, the charts lie. Standardize workflow states and definitions as a precondition to trusting visual signals in decision meetings, and make that standardization explicit before you act on the chart's story. Reporting without deciding is a third anti-pattern. Producing pretty charts for governance that never lead to a concrete mitigation or experiment wastes time and erodes credibility. A metric that prompts no action becomes noise. When a chart shows a worrying trend, pair it immediately with a decision-oriented proposal, a WIP reduction, a swarming plan, a focused defect sprint, or a scope negotiation. Insist that any regular report include a recommended next step and a named owner so metrics remain a lever for change rather than a passive artifact of bureaucracy. When you communicate metrics to stakeholders, prepare a single-slide narrative that answers 4 plain questions: what changed, why it matters, what action you propose, and the new forecast range. Start the slide with the one-line headline. For example, cycle time increased by 30% last 2 sprints, proposed WIP limit tightening and 2-day swarming experiment. Expect median cycle time to decline within 2 sprints. Then attach the concise chart and a one-line rationale. Avoid jargon and translate technical signals into outcomes stakeholders care about, like delivery risk, date ranges, or potential costs to rework. This focused slide makes governance decisions faster and reduces the need for lengthy explanations. Avoid drowning stakeholders in raw charts or technical language. Translate visuals into benefits and risks and show the options available with their impacts. For each recommended action, give a short trade-off statement. What will change about date, scope, or quality if you do X versus Y? Keep the single link to live data in the slide so decision-makers can drill if they want, but present the distilled conclusion first. Doing this maintains trust. You show evidence, but you lead with a recommendation so leaders can decide without parsing complex graphs. Always indicate the decision needed from stakeholders and the options you considered. For example, write, "Decision needed. Approve scope reduction of lower priority polish items to preserve the target date, or approve a 1-iteration buffer." Options: A. Reduce scope, reduces date risk, but removes planned features. B. Add a 1-iteration buffer, preserves features, but delays delivery. C. Add temporary QA resources, may improve throughput, but increases cost and onboarding risk. A clear options table, plus the one-line forecast range, lets leaders choose quickly and with context. Scenario vignette. The cumulative flow diagram's in-progress band has been bulging for 3 weeks, while the sprint burndown is flat across multiple days, and stakeholders are demanding a firm plan and dates. Option 1. Add more people immediately to increase throughput. Option 2. Tighten work-in-progress limits, force team focus, and implement a 2-day swarming practice on the oldest items. Option 3. Renegotiate the commitments with stakeholders and push out near-term dates. Option 4. Ignore the signals and assume variability will settle out. I'll give you a moment to consider that. The best next action is Option 2. Tighten WIP limits, swarm on the bottleneck, and unblock impediments, because the visual signals point to queuing at a constrained step, not a lack of people per se. Reduce WIP to force prioritization. Assign owners to unblock the oldest cards, and concentrate cross-functional attention briefly to clear the backlog. This approach attacks the root cause, excess concurrency and blocked flow, and typically reduces lead time faster than adding headcount. After a short swarming window, reforecast and present the updated Burnup and CFD to stakeholders with the new range and confidence. Contrast that with Option 1, adding people immediately, which is the strongest distractor because it often multiplies coordination costs, increases context switching, and simply raises WIP without improving flow at the constrained step. Option 3, renegotiating dates, may be necessary if systemic capacity cannot be increased or if dependencies demand it, but it should follow an evidence-based attempt to improve flow first. Option 4, ignoring the charts, cedes control to random variability and almost always results in worse predictability and higher rework. Charts are actionable only when you act. Pitfalls remain common, creating pretty dashboards that never drive decisions, choosing single-point forecasts rather than ranges, or hiding scope changes so burndowns look better than reality. A useful quick playbook keeps things simple and action-oriented. Choose the single metric that best answers your question, read its trend aloud with stated assumptions, decide a small experiment or corrective action, and measure the effect in the next cadence. This loop, measure, decide, act, measure, keeps metrics practical and keeps teams focused on improvement rather than optics. Your compact playbook in daily practice. Pick the right chart for the question. Burndown for sprint-level pace, Burnup for scope and release, CFD for flow health. Describe the signal and assumptions in one sentence. Propose 1 or 2 actionable responses with owners, and follow up in the next stand-up or demo with the effect. Document the decision in the single source of truth so future reviewers see both the data and the lesson. When metrics are used this way, they become tools for learning and predictable delivery rather than trophies of activity. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.